Welcome to Discovering Your Past. In my search for my Hungarian roots, I was having a difficult time finding some of the resources that I need, so I decided to visit our local family history center. While I was there, I had a chance to talk to the former and current directors, Lawrence and Helen Ullman, and David and Patty Ogden, chatted with us about the resources of the center, microfilms, research, and so much more. So let's take a look and see what a great resource the Family History Center can be in discovering your past.
The main function of a family history center, as compared to just a place where you can go online and do family history, is that you can order films from Salt Lake. You order the films online, but you cannot have them sent to your home. They have to be sent to a family history center. And there are over 4,000 family history centers around the world. Now, there are some places that are not owned by the church that are family history centers. Chelmsford Public Library has the ability to order films from Salt Lake. The New England Historical Genealogical Society in Boston does.
Many people can just look at microfilm online. However, people tend to think that it's all online, and it's not by any means. People have stopped ordering as much microfilm because they can get some of the basic things online. But there's, like the other day, I was editing an article and I wanted to look at some Vermont land records for a town in Vermont, and so I went on to familysearch.org and discovered that there were land records for that particular town in Vermont. There's only a few that are on there. But then it turned out that the earlier records were not on there, only the later ones. So I was stumped, and the only way I could see them would be to order Family History Library microfilm and have it sent to the Family History Center. You use the Family History Library catalog to identify what you want, and that's online. In fact, it's a good idea to explore the Family History Library catalog because there's a lot of material out there that people just are not, if you haven't been doing genealogy for quite a while, you're apt not to be aware. And so you can just go into the catalog and browse around and see what there is. And if you find microfilm that's not already online, then you can order it. If you find a book, that stays in Salt Lake, but they now have the policy that a lot of the books in Salt Lake can be viewed online, even though they're under copyright. They can be viewed online if you're in the Family History Center.
We've got a variety of things. We have some that are very general for any kind of research, really, like foreign language dictionaries, old maps. We also have a series of Civil War books for the Massachusetts troops. Everybody who served in the Civil War from Massachusetts has his, I guess you'd say, his military biography written up. So if you're looking for someone, and there was a case just recently, a young fellow, 20 years old, who was buried in Massachusetts, and his entire military career, from his initial enlistment to his death in a prison camp, is recorded, as are the similar information for all the soldiers and sailors, Marines that served for Massachusetts. It's a big series. It takes up a whole shelf. We have a number of other reference books of, well, sort of an odd collection, very general. Some of them are very old, too. Who's Who books, notable people, prominent citizens. We have, city directories and, town directories, a little of everything, mostly for the New England states, and some from Quebec and Nova Scotia, but it's mostly the New England states.
Well, as my husband said, he's most familiar with the books on the bookshelf. There's a lot of reference books in here, both genealogical and general genealogy research, how to do it. There's also the computers, which have quite a few subscription websites available that are available to any patron for free, including things like Ancestry.com, Heritage Quest. We have access to Fold 3, which is the military records. In fact, I was able to find a widow's pension record, again, my husband's family. I'm first generation American, so I can't find anything in the United States. But So we were able to find a widow's pension, Civil War widow's pension record that got us more information about a family, all through these subscription websites. We also have, as you can see, microfilms and microfiche. We have some permanent collection films that always stay here from all over the world. And then we also have patron-ordered films that rotate. Some patrons order them on extended, which means they stay here until they tell us they're done with them. And then some will just order them on short term, which means they're here for 90 days and then they go back to Salt Lake City. We try to keep in the permanent collection what we know our patrons are researching. And I know from the films that are coming in that a lot of people are doing Italian research, Hispanic research. So any of those extended films, if a patron is done with them and it's an area that we have a lot of use for, I move it into the permanent collection. We have a lot of the British and Scottish census on microfiche. We have a lot of United States, all different states, mostly New England, but Kentucky, California, some of the Midwestern states. We also have quite a bit of Irish microfilms, land records. We have what's called the Corbin collection, which is genealogies that people have submitted. Gosh, I did the inventory about a year or so ago, so it's hard to remember everything that's over there, but it's from all over the world. We have a lot of Canadian, actually, French Canadian especially, because a lot of people research that in this area.
But there's other filming that's being done now on new records, not new records, but old records that have never been filmed before by the church, put on microfilm, but they're done with digital cameras so that they're already digitized, but they still have to be indexed as well.
Well, they come from everywhere. They come from churches, they come from municipal archives, small towns, big cities, churches of all denominations. They come from everybody that'll share it with us. It's a bonanza for doing research. Not everybody is willing to share with us, but I think the majority out there are, see it as a public service and are willing to share what they have and make it available to everybody, a global library, if you will.
And the church has actually been collecting genealogical records from all over the world for about 115 years. And right now they have, we have over 4,700 centers like this, and bigger and smaller, in 134 countries. And the way we get the data is volunteer work. Sometimes you've probably heard of our missionaries, seen them going out 2 by 2 with the little black badges. When a couple retires, or if they're independently wealthy and want to do this, they can do what's called a family history mission, where they will go to a town or a municipality that the church has worked with, and they've agreed to let the church film their records, and in return the church gives them copies of the microfilms. And they will go and copy everything in that archive. And that's how the records get back to Salt Lake City. And then Salt Lake City, now what we're doing is we're digitizing them, then they become an indexing project, and then they become available to everyone online for free. Years ago, when I first joined the church, I asked to be part of that because I was into genealogy. They called it extraction then, and they would literally come and give you this pile of papers, a CD to put in your computer, and a program that had to be on your computer where you would type everything in, and then you'd give the CD and all the papers back to the director. They would verify your information. It would go to Salt Lake where it would be re-verified again, so it was a real process. Then everything went electronic on Family Search, and anyone who wants to do this now can. You just go to Family Search, you sign up as a volunteer, get yourself an account, go to the indexing page, download a batch, and off you go. And all the instructions for each project are right there online. There's handwriting helps, there's hints on how to do the indexing. I've been indexing now probably since 1997 in one form or another. And I think now that it's tracked electronically, I've indexed about 50,000 names. It's a rewarding thing to do. I love it. It's just as addicting to me as genealogy research is. I don't like doing death records because there were too many infants. And it just saddens me when I see that. You know, it just breaks my heart. I'm a mother of 4 children, and I sit there and I want to cry for those parents. The thing I love doing are obituaries, believe it or not, conversely, because there's so much information in them, and you find out the coolest things. I was doing some obituary records not too long ago and ran across an astronaut who had died, and it was more recent ones. It was like, whoa, this guy has a really cool history. I was reading the whole thing just because it was so fascinating. And but I think my all-time favorite is the census records, just because you get a feel for the community, of where people came from, if they were immigrants, if it's an older established community. You just get a real sense of the area and what it was like.
It's important. People want to look at vital records, and if they can look for census records, people should look for every census record that they can, because you never know who else might be in a family, or you never know. And census records are not always accurate, so it's important to check every year. For instance, in the United States, the first census was taken in 1790, and it's been taken every 10 years, and so we can see up through 1940, except 1890 was burned, and so that's not available. But if you follow somebody in every census record, you may get all sorts of information. And the importance of looking at every one is that if the information changes, the birthplace or the age changes. Some people got younger with each census. And you wonder, if they just didn't want to appear as old as they were.
People don't always give their correct date of birth. People forget. Family history and genealogy, I've found, is a very detail-oriented business. You want to get obviously as much information as you can, and with as much exactness as you can. Dates are important, preferably accurate dates. Places are important. Places are more important than dates because you need to know where to go to look things up. The computer will do a lot of the searching for you. Most of my own family history I've done without computers. And for example, if you want to look up an obituary in a local newspaper, you want to go to the right place. You want to go to the right small town on Long Island, or the right small town in any of the New England states, or you're just not going to find it. A big place like Boston or New York, major newspapers, wide area of coverage, there's a little more margin for error. Precision is important. That's something you really can't forget.
But other than that, it's just a matter of starting with what you know, and then going to things like census records, especially because census records do not tell you everything you want to know about that individual, but at least it gives you an idea of what to look for, because it tells you, like in the United States, the census records will, from 1850 on, will tell you where each person in the household was born, but not the town, just the state. So at least that's a starting point. And then you work from there and get more detailed information, because you want to know what town they were born in, or what county if it's in Midwestern records. New England, you go by towns, and Midwest, it's more by counties, because that's where the records were kept. And then you can find other family members. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that you don't just find out your direct ancestry, but you find out everything you can about siblings and other people in the household. And sometimes that'll lead to important information. Down the line, it may not seem important at this time. Then you can make a connection later with somebody else.
In fact, if you're doing a lot of American research, one of the things I've learned recently that I didn't realize, when you look at a census record, it's often a good idea to take note of the neighbors, especially if it was in rural areas. Large cities, less so, unless it's a real ethnic enclave, because people in the United States, once they came here, if they were immigrants, usually moved in groups. So if you can't find your ancestor, find one of their neighbors, and you might be able to find your ancestor. It might have been transcribed incorrectly in the indexing or whatever. So even though everything's on the computer, it really depends on the indexer and how well they can read sloppy handwriting, ink blots, things like that. So sometimes if you can't find your ancestor, if you search one of the neighbors, you might actually find them that way.
Well, the other day there was a fellow that came in. This was a family that had come to Boston from, Germany. They had come from Germany. And he had some records for them, but and we were able to identify another generation back by looking at census records, which we could do online. But then people, if they're subscribed to websites online, they can look at census records, but they can come into the Family History Center and look at them without having to pay a subscription. So we were able to find some census records for him. But then I said, there are other things that are not on microfilm and they're not online. I wanted him to get his grandparents, or maybe it was his great-grandparents' death records from the city of Boston. And so we have librarians that can help somebody identify, not just find the records for them right here, but help people understand where they can go to get other records.
I would say, though, in addition to the Family History Center, there's what I like to call fieldwork. You've heard us say that not everything is on the internet, and not everything is on microfilm yet. Oftentimes you just have to go someplace and visit graveyards, visit local town, village libraries, to get obituaries that you can't get anywhere else, to photograph a gravestone that no one has looked at in 20 or 30 years. The fieldwork has taken us to a lot of different places. Some cemeteries, are thinking of one in New Jersey now where I have family buried. It's not in a good neighborhood, and under police protection they have an open house every spring, so people can come in, clean things up, take pictures, and do that kind of field work for their own family histories. That you're not going to find on the internet. You're not going to find that on microfilm. Some things you have to get out there and just get your hands dirty with.
I think for foreign travel, like when Helen and I went to Scotland, I think we spent more time in cemeteries than anything else, because cemeteries are one area where it's a hit and miss as to whether it's online or whether it's on microfilm. All these little local cemeteries, there's a lot out there that you just have to go and find it somehow. Okay, that's one reason for traveling. And also local historical societies, they'll have file cabinets of material, just handwritten, some of it. And you won't find that online unless some dedicated volunteers have decided to organize it and put it up online.
What's on the internet is the tip of the iceberg. What's on the microfilm is a chunk of the iceberg, but there's also a lot of other stuff that you can only get. And there are gaps in the microfilm. Like I was just saying on the way up, we were talking about it. They filmed the land records of Suffolk County, Boston, years ago, and they left out volume 22. So I've gone to the state archives and I've looked at volume 22, but it's not on microfilm. So there's a lot that's not on microfilm.
Well, the one thing that makes it more difficult is people's expectations. We live in some would say a computer-obsessed world. Some people have the idea that everything that ever happened in human history is on the internet, and especially some of the young people, and that just isn't true. Most of life is not on the computer yet. We'll probably get to that point, but we're not there yet. So all those millions of rolls of microfilm and all the obituaries that I mentioned, and graveyards, courthouses, there's so much that is just not on the internet. There is a lot on the internet, and I've used it, and it's been very helpful. I've been able to track down people that I would not have found otherwise.
I just had an example recently where I had a line of the Ullman line that I was pretty sure was connected to my Ullman line. It's not a very common name in this country, so it's easy to make connections just because the people both were in Watertown, New York, and they were both they had overlaps of geographical areas and connections, but I couldn't find a connection on anything that I looked at, and so I found this in one of the lines. There was a fairly famous Ullman, a General Ullman in the Civil War, and he had, and I found out the New York Historical Society had microfilm just on this person. And so I looked at it, and it wasn't indexed. I went online and found out, and it wasn't indexed, but it was categorized. And so they had, some of the microfilm had letters. And so I decided just to order, there were 5 rolls of microfilm, order it from New York Historical Society. I did that through my local library in Acton, Massachusetts, interlibrary loan. And I went right to the letters section of that, and I started going through the microfilm, and all of a sudden I saw Racine, Wisconsin come up at the heading of one of the letters. I said, that's it. That's the connection, because I knew that my line had gone to Racine, Wisconsin, whereas this other line had gone to Wilmington, Delaware, and then eventually New York City. So I made a connection between the 2 lines by just a letter that was on microfilm, but it would never have been on in Salt Lake necessarily. It just wasn't filmed by the church.
Well, actually, there's one that's more personal between my husband and me that was really cool. He has a great-grand-uncle, who was a member of the Christian Brothers. He's a monk, priest. And he was fairly well known in Manhattan. He served as a president of Manhattan College for a while. And we found all his information and everything on all his family members, we thought. And we also believe in the guidance of the Holy Ghost in this work. And my husband knew that all his work had been done. We had all the information we could find. And he just kept getting this nagging feeling that there was something missing. And so finally he decided, since he did serve as president of Manhattan College, to go look up his obituary in the New York Times. We went down to the New York Public Library, I believe is how he did it, or it might have actually been here locally. And he found his obituary, and in reading through, it turned out there was one sister we had missed. His youngest sister was born in 1881. She became a nun in 1900, in 1900 when she was 19 years old in January. The censuses are normally taken in June. The 1890 census has been destroyed by fire, so that meant she was on no census records with her family because she missed the 1880 census, the 1890 one was missing, and by the time the 1900 one was done, she was a nun. So we believe that Brother Jasper really wanted his sister found. And not only did we find her, we found out she's buried in Lawrence, Massachusetts. So we actually got to go to her grave and find her gravesite and everything. All because of the obituary. If we had not, so it's, it's kind of goes back to what my husband said earlier about not everything being on the internet. This was not on the internet. This was a microfilm, or I think it was microfilm he looked at, of the New York Times. He found the obituary, and if that just one line, it mentioned her, just one line at the very end of the obituary, and mentioned that she was a Catholic nun.
So there's a lot of records, and there's also on FamilySearch.org, we have what's called, it's like Wikipedia, only it's for genealogy. And you can look at that and get help to find out what kind of records might be available, or how to search them, or how to keep track of what you're doing. So it is important to keep track of where you get information. I mean, anytime you want to find the answer to a question, you look for the place where you're going to find it. And you can use the wiki to learn how. I mean, for instance, the wiki, I had to do a book on a family who lived in New Jersey for some of the generations. I'd never done research in New Jersey, so I got what we used to call a research outline on New Jersey. Now it would be in a wiki. And I just used that with my Bible to find out what records are available and where are they. And I made a trip to Trenton. I made a trip to, what's the university in New Jersey? Rutgers? New Brunswick, in Brunswick, New Jersey. And so I made trips various places. And sometimes all I was doing was looking at microfilm when I was on the trip. Other times I might be getting documents that are only there.
Doing family history can be a little bit addictive if you get into it, you know, and try to figure out what's the connection. And this one connection I mentioned between the two Ullman lines, I've had other situations where there's been puzzles of what might be a connection, but a lot of hints. So you start with circumstantial evidence and then you work towards the real evidence. And sometimes the real evidence may not even exist. So then you have to decide on the circumstantial evidence whether it's valuable enough. But Helen, my wife, has to deal with that all the time because she edits other people's submissions for family history and decide whether all the sources have been looked at.
The reason we focus on genealogy is actually religious-based for us. We believe that after death, that families are together as family units in heaven. And so it's very important to us to research our ancestors, both so that we know who they are. And I always like to say that there's genealogy and there's family history. Genealogy is the dates and the places and the facts. And family history is those wonderful stories about Aunt Mabel, you know, doing whatever. So you want to get both so that you have an idea of who your ancestors are when you meet them. And the other reason is that we have this lovely temple in Boston, and most people know the one out in Salt Lake City, where we believe that we can go and do some work for our ancestors to make it possible for us to live together as families. But even with that, we also believe that everybody has their free agency, so even if we do this work for our ancestors, it's up to them whether or not they choose to participate.
You don't have to be LDS. In fact, most of the people who come in are not Latter-day Saints, come from all denominations, Christian, Jewish, and unaffiliated. It's just open to everybody, and everyone's welcome.
That's our mission, is just to help people connect their families. That's what we want. And we wish, I personally wish this center were used more. I would love to have to put people on waiting lists here for the computers and the microfilm machines. So if anybody wants to come in, please feel free.
It's strictly a nonprofit operation. People that work there are volunteers. You know, nobody's getting paid for this. It's a service to the community. And
if you've ever thought about doing family history work or looking into your ancestry, come on in. We'll try to help you get started. We'd just love to help you.
The Nashua, New Hampshire Family History Center is located at 110 Concord Street and can be reached at 603-594-8888. You can find them on Facebook at facebook.com/NashuaFHC and the Family Search Wiki by searching for Nashua Family History Center. For LDS church members, they do have their calendar on lds.org. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to look into your local Family History Center to see how they can help you in discovering your past. For more information on this or any other episode, visit discoveringyourpast.com.